so great, I don't have a mark on my face, and I upset Sonny Liston, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I told the world, I talk to God every day. If God's with the king, no matter, he'll get us the same. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world.
I said, can I be a legend? Search your soul and answer me this question. Do you think I have what it takes to be great, but still be humble and learn from my mistakes? Shit.
Good night, everyone. Welcome back. Well, really welcome back to me. Yes, I am back. So sorry to be missing last week, but I am here. Don't worry. I will not be missing again. So first, let me thank Dwayne Marcus of the Goat Talk with Marcus for ably filling in. Thank you so very much. And indeed, welcome back to Steezy A. Smith. What's going on, my brother?
Yo, brother, man. Happy to be on. Excited to be back on. I feel like ever since the calendar flipped over to 2022, I haven't been on anything. I was on Dwayne's show the other day, so technically that was my first pod of the year. But, man, I'm excited to get back into the flow of things. So thanks for having me on, and I hope you guys are doing wonderful.
Well, Dwayne probably said Happy New Year from everyone in terms of everyone for this justice. So let me do that as well. Happy New Year, everyone. And, well, what a way to ring in the new year. Like yesterday's into week, 18 in the NFL, including that epic Sunday nighter where I correctly predicted, but I didn't get to do it on the show, that the Chargers again would lay an egg and not be in the playoffs. Guess we all watched that game. Dwayne, I'm going to start with you. We didn't have the intro on tonight, but it was supposed to deal with Brandon Staley, and the episode is indeed titled, Did Brandon Staley Cost the Chargers a playoff spot? So yeah, Dwayne, over to you. How do you feel?
Yeah, Brandon Staley cost the Chargers a playoff spot. I mean, it doesn't get much simpler than that, right? When you're, what was there, like less than, we're talking 30 some odd seconds left. The game is tied. The Raiders have the ball. We all know the situation. We had been talking about it from the week before when the week 18 playoff scenarios came out. What would need to happen for this entire week to go haywire? The Jaguars had to handle business at home and beat the Colts, and they did just that. And we'll get into that a little bit later in the show. And so now the Chargers and the Raiders were very full aware that if the game ends in a tie, both teams are in. I'm pretty sure that Brandon Staley was aware of that. And his reasoning that he provided for calling the timeout after in his press conference, I mean, made perfect sense, right? He had a feeling that they were going to run, try to milk out the clock. You want to put the person out there, and that makes perfect sense. In any other scenario, except for a scenario where if you just let the game end in a tie and you let the Raiders run out the clock, which head coach Rich Bassia admitted that they were thinking about doing, you would have been in the playoffs. We talked about this the last time I was on the show, not as a host, but as a guest. The last time I was on the show, if I'm not mistaken, I was here with Brian Bolster and Joe Skirto, and we had a conversation about whether or not analytics were good or bad. And Brandon Staley was brought up in that conversation. And in having that conversation, Brian Bolster, who is a high school head coach, he said quite frankly, you just don't really understand the magnitude of the decision that you're making unless you're in that position, right? So the people that are calling for Brandon Staley to be fired over this doesn't make any sense because the team has improved, the offense has gotten better, the defense has gotten better, Justin Herbert has gotten better, this team has gotten better, and it's still going to be a threat in the AFC for years to come. But no matter how you slice it, yeah, Brandon Staley cost his Chargers a shot at playing in the playoffs this season.
Steezy, are you going to put this all on the head coach, or are you saying no, there's another reason the Chargers are not in the playoffs?
You know, what I'm about to say, it might sound kind of contradictory because I know in the past I'm on record saying that, you know, a lot of the times, especially, you know, with Pete Carroll in Seattle, I might feel a little differently, but that's neither here nor there about Pete. But a lot of times when things are going wrong right within an organization, you look towards the head of the snake. You look towards the guy who's supposed to shoulder all this responsibility. And most of the time it's the head coach. But in this particular situation, it's kind of hard for me to put all this blame on Brandon Staley. I'm not saying that he had the perfect explanation. I'm not saying that he had the perfect logic. It's just, to me, when I look at what ensued, right? It was under 5 minutes to go. This team was down 2 possessions. I thought the game was over. And so overtime and for it to end that it did. I mean, hats off to him. Hats off to Justin Herbert, who became the 9th quarterback in NFL history to throw for 5,000 yards in the season. I mean, my goodness, in the second year. But look, I'm going to go back to a couple weeks ago when they lost to the Texans. And I know that every team in the NFL has had to deal with COVID. And so it's not like no other teams, haven't dealt with COVID. But against the Texans, who they lost to for whatever reason, they didn't have their best offensive player in Austin Eckler. They didn't have Mike Williams. They didn't have a whole bunch of other guys. The team was severely depleted because of COVID. And so with the way that the Houston Texans battled down the stretch, they weren't as bad as the record might indicate. They fight hard. They have a competent rookie quarterback in Davis Mills. And so although lost to the Texans, I'm not going to put that solely on Brandon Staley. He's still a first-year head coach, and while he is the type of guy that prides himself on defense, you don't just build and overhaul a defense within a year of being hired. I mean, this team had a whole bunch of holes on that defense, and so although he is a defensive-minded type of guy, I'm not going to expect him to just come in and bring in an elite defense. I mean, the run defense was the worst in football. Justin, you've been talking about it all year long. That run defense bleeds and leaks rushing yards, and so even if Brandon Staley didn't call timeout, I'm calling BS on head coach Rich Bisaccia. I don't think they were seriously considering tying the game. They're in Vegas. They haven't make the playoffs while they've been in Vegas. And I know that's only been a couple of years, but of course they were going to do it for the fans. Although they knew that they were going to go to the playoffs regardless, whether it was a tie or a win. I had no doubt in my mind they were going to win that game no matter what. No matter if Brandon Staley called a timeout or whatnot, that run defense has been bleeding yards left and right all year long. They were going to do what they were going to do. They were going to kick the field goal, and they were going to win the game. They weren't just going to do that for Vegas. They were going to do it for their fans, and they deserve it. Derek Carr deserves it. When he had an MVP year back in 2016, he couldn't even be there for the playoffs because of a broken fibula he suffered. And so they did it for the fans. They did it for the city of Las Vegas. They did it for Derek Carr. What happened, whether or not he would have called a timeout, I feel like we would have seen the same outcome regardless. And so hats off to Staley, hats off to Herbert, hats off to the Chargers. The Chargers for years have been known as the team that usually charges it up. And, although that might seem like it happened this time around for the most of the year, and I feel like they're a team that will definitely be one to – man, they're going to be a threat in the AFC for years to come, like Dwayne said. So I'm not going to put this on Staley. I'm just going to put it on, I guess, the roster and what happened to the Texans a couple of weeks ago. So no, I disagree.
I mean, just before Justin gets in, I was gonna tweet this last night, but I didn't because I wanted to save it for my show. But I ended up here, so I'll just say it now. We looked at Justin Herbert in his rookie season last season, and the big issue with Justin Herbert last season was, or really the Chargers last season, was the same issue that we saw with the Patriots, right? Was that, well, kind of, in a way, right? The Patriots were, as you all know, a couple plays away from being a 10-win football team last season with Cam Newton as the starter and all this stuff. The Los Angeles Chargers were a couple of bad coaching decisions away from making a 10-win football team last season, making it to the playoffs. And Justin Herbert absolutely balled out. And I'll be completely honest with you. Mm-hmm. As a Justin Herbert fan, I didn't know if Justin Herbert could surpass what he did last season because he didn't have Austin Eckler. Obviously, there was COVID, so the roster was, it was a revolving door with the roster as it was this season. And also, Anthony Lynn, as much as I thought that Anthony Lynn was a good hire when he was hired, the coaching decisions were just terrible, like on a week-to-week basis last season with Anthony Lynn. And Justin Herbert still found a way to, like, what did he? He broke the single-season touchdown record or something like that and did all these amazing things. And then he follows that up with this incredible season. He was the only other quarterback not named Tom Brady to throw for 5,000 yards this season. That's elite company to be in. Having this team once again, despite the bad loss of the Texans, once again in position to make it to the playoffs. I mean, they converted all six of their last fourth downs in this football game. Now, we a couple weeks ago, we tried to slaughter, so to speak, Brandon Staley for his aggressiveness. But we're talking about third and long situations, every single third and long and fourth and longs. Justin Herbert's finding a way to convert, including the game-tying touchdown at the end of regulation. And so here we have it again, another bad coaching decision, right? Keeps Justin Herbert out of the playoffs. So from a talent standpoint, I really, really, really believe, and maybe this is a bit of a hot take, the Los Angeles Chargers might just be in the same boat as the Dallas Cowboys, right? Because we all know that Dallas Cowboys roster is extremely, 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 extremely talented. And the one thing we always kept saying about the Cowboys when Jason Garrett was the head coach was that the coaching was always going to be the reason that they couldn't make deep playoff runs. They wouldn't be in the Super Bowl. And here they have Mike McCarthy. And let's be honest, Mike McCarthy's not that much of an upgrade from Jason Garrett. And as long as Mike McCarthy's the head coach in Dallas, they're going to continue to struggle to win playoff games and make it to the Super Bowl because he's just not that guy anymore. Based on what we've seen so far this season with Brandon Staley, based on how the AFC looked with Cincinnati coming up, and clearly New England hasn't gone anywhere, which I've been saying to people for the last 2 years, and I don't know why no one believed me, but New England hasn't gone anywhere. We'll get into it later, but like the Colts are coming and all these other teams are there. I don't know if decisions like this, regardless of the reasoning, when you look at the big picture, I don't know if decisions like this are conducive of a playoff winning football team, conducive of a team that can make it to the Super Bowl, conducive of a team that can win the Super Bowl. So I just really, really, really feel bad for Justin Herbert because this is 2 years in a row now that he's played outstanding and he can't go to the playoffs because a coach made a bad call.
So I'm glad Steezy brought up a particular point now because I've had friends in all levels of professional circles tell me this. When you're at the top of the chain, you're not paid for the level of work that you do. You're paid because of the level of accountability that you have. That's why you get top dollar. And correct me if I'm wrong, last season we fired Anthony Lynn. Why? Because his defense was bad and he couldn't win one-score games, correct? I think he went 5-7 in one-score games. And he was third in the division and also I think they surrendered 26.6 points per game. Well, guess what? Brandon Staley, being a defensive mind, was brought in to change those things. And the Chargers merely improved to 5-5 in one-score games. They gave up 27 points per game with a defensive mind at the helm. Furthermore, because it is not just this game in which Brandon Staley cost the Chargers a playoff spot. Let me run through some stuff for you. As a defensive minder, this guy, as you pointed out, gave up the third most rushing yards the entire season at 4.6 yards per carry. He gave up 37 points to an offensively inept Steelers team, 41 to the Texans, 42 to the Browns, and in a must-have-it game, 35 to the Oakland Raiders, who could not the Las Vegas Raiders, who could not previously run the football, and he gave up 170-odd yards rushing. If Anthony Lynn was a problem last year, then what is Brandon Staley right now if he's even worse at the things that we fired Anthony Lynn for? Let's get to this game. We talk about analytics, and I realize it is no longer analytics that really rules Brandon Staley. It is just him being over-aggressive at points he does not need to be over-aggressive. You can't win a game in the first quarter, but you can sure as hell lose it in the first quarter. And going for 4th and 1 on your side of it was the 18, is absolute madness. Because I don't think he understands time, place, and positional football. Because if you don't convert, as we saw, you are definitely giving up points. And thankfully for him, it was only 3. He is the problem why they fell down 15 in the first place. And part of that, I guess, is a good thing because he believes that Justin Herbert and Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen are so good stuff out of situations like 3rd and longs or whatever 4th down situations are. I'm sorry, Steezy, I'm not calling BS on what the Raiders coach said because I sat and watched that game. And I don't want to quote Rex Ryan, but Rex Ryan, who's a head coach, said he realized what was going on. The entire world knew what the Raiders were doing because unlike Brandon Staley, who is so over-aggressive, he wants to win games. Typical head coaches try not to lose them first. And when you have a game on the line or a playoff spot on the line and you know, let us say for argument's sake, I kick a field goal short, it gets blocked, I can lose this game. Most head coaches in a situation try their best not to lose the game first before they win it. The head coach himself said this, I watched that part. God from above has to come and tell me he was not playing for a tie before Brandon Staley called that timeout. I said this early in the season, and Dwayne can attest to this. I do not think that Brandon Staley is a man for this job. I think he is in over his head. He does not understand situational football. He does not understand time and place. And he thinks that every single fourth down is the same. And it is not the case. There's time and there's situation, and he does not understand situational football. I don't think he should be fired because I'm a better head coach. But I want y'all guys to sit down and understand a team with Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler. I'm sure Derwin James. He had Derwin James for the entire season when Anthony Lynn did not. And his defense got worse. That team, with all those players, are sitting down at home watching the playoffs while the Steelers and the Raiders and the Patriots are playing them. So yes, Anthony Lynn, in my estimation, cost them, and not just this game. And he is the reason why a more talented Chargers team is watching while the Steelers, the Patriots, and the Raiders are playing. That being said, guys, though, at least Brandon Staley did do one thing for me. And in my estimation, he gave us the best game of the year. Steezy, do you agree with that? Do you think this game, the last game of a very long 18-game season, was indeed the best game of the season?
You know, I might be a victim of recency bias just because this game literally took place last night. But I'm going to have to say, I mean, given the circumstances, given, what was on the line, given what was at stake, given that these two teams are AFC West rivals, given that the game literally took all of overtime to decide a victor, I had to say, yeah. It was really entertaining from start to finish. And even at one point when I thought the game was over, I was like, I still gotta watch, because Justin Herbert's on the other sideline, and you just never know, what he's capable of, or what he's capable of. So although there's less than 5 to go and the Chargers are down by 2 possessions, you got to keep watching. You got to stay tuned in, And so all the things that I mentioned, on top of the fact that we're witnessing, 2 star quarterbacks. Derek Carr, if he's not top 10 at his position, I think last night solidified that. He didn't throw for, all the glitz and glam. I don't even think he surpassed 200, but just the type of throws that he was making, he was clutch. He delivered. He made all the throws that he needed to make. And obviously the ground game definitely, played its part. But the ground game has kind of been hot for the last 3 weeks. If I'm not mistaken, came into the game averaging 140 yards rushing in the last 3 games. And so for them to put up 170 on that Chargers run defense, that's not a surprise to me at all. But I think given all the things that I mentioned, I got to say it's the game of the year, And for some of the people, there might be other games that come to mind. But like I said, recency bias, that is a thing. And a lot of people tend to fall into that prison in the moment type of thing. So I'm going to have to say I might be a victim of that, but I'm going to have to agree. Yeah, it was a year.
Are you a prisoner moment, Dwayne, or was there a better game this season that's, to your recollection?
On a personal level, the game of the year for me was Green Bay going into Arizona shorthanded with no wide receivers and beating the undefeated Arizona Cardinals. But no, if we're being realistic, I can see why everyone thinks it's the game of the year. It's a regular season finale. It lived up to all the hype. We almost got the potential tease of the tie, which we had been talking about for a week. But I don't know. I feel like the Ravens game that kicked off the season on Monday Night Football, I think that was a better game than this. I think that in a way the Raiders game against the Cowboys was a better game than this to a degree. I even think that the Raiders coming back at home on prime time against the Colts was a better game than this. And to double up on that, I think you can make an argument that the Ravens game against the Chiefs at home with Lamar Jackson finally beating Patrick Mahomes, if I'm not mistaken, on Sunday Night Football. I think you could say that was a better game than this one. That doesn't take away from the magnitude of this game. That doesn't take away from, obviously, what this game meant. This is obviously a divisional game. I was telling someone, I said, I think maybe they do this, and I just don't pay attention to the schedule that much. But, like, if every week of the season ended with a whole bunch of divisional matchups, I would not be one bit upset about it, because I think divisional games are really the best types of games because they're always heated. You never know what can happen. And as we know, anything can happen in divisional games. This is a good game. It was definitely, I think, one of the best games, I think this was the best game of Justin Herbert's career. I think Justin Herbert, I tweeted last night that Justin Herbert absolutely solidified himself as a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Derek Carr, I think, also solidified himself as a top 10 QB in the NFL, which is something that we kind of forgot about because it's been so long. Obviously, Steezy mentioned earlier his run in 2016. If he didn't have that injury, he probably would have been MVP that year. The Raiders might even went to the Super Bowl that year, and he didn't get to play in that playoff game after getting them to the playoffs despite his injury. So this is a really good moment for Derek Carr to finally be able to lead this football team to the playoffs. Really good moment for this football team in general with everything that's going on, obviously with the Henry Ruggs and the other guy that got arrested and booted off the team, and then obviously everything with John Gruden. So I don't know if this is the game of the year. It's up there, though. I think you could put it in the top 3, but me personally, I would say that at least my favorite game of the year was Monday Night Football Week 1 with the Raiders and the Ravens. I think that game was just that game took all of overtime. There was a constant back and forth with the interceptions and all that other, especially down to the wire. So I preferred that one over this one because it was just a little bit more dramatic than this one. But I mean, you can't go wrong either way.
Excuse me for the pun, Neil. You could kick me off the show if you want, but shackle me up because I am a prisoner of the moment. For me, that was indeed the game of the year because of everything that was associated with it, with all the high stakes and drama. In a winner takes all game, like, win and you're in situation. As you said, we all know what the situation was with the tie, and you had a dramatic comeback. They fell behind, being the Chargers, by as many as 15 points, and you had a situation where not only did Justin Herbert solidify, and I think he's a top 5 quarterback now in the league, he converted, I want to say, 6 fourth downs between the fourth quarter and overtime just to tie this game twice. They went into overtime, and there were 3 scores in overtime. When's the last time you've had a game in overtime with 3 scores just to decide the last playoff spot, which could have ended up in a tie? Like Brandon Staley's side, oh my gosh, like throw after throw from Justin Herbert, where he said, well, this game is over. Nope, not over. We kept going and going and going. And I mean, like, Dwayne is correct. We probably have seen better play from 2 teams combined in a game. But the theater, the what was on the line from 2 division rivals that went into overtime and deep into overtime. And yeah, you imagine, I'm about to tell you, well, the Chargers Raiders last game of the season is going to be decided on the very, very final play of overtime after 2 previous scores in overtime. We're all going to take it. Like, I never thought this game was going to live up to the hype, but not only did it live up to the hype, but it darn well surpassed it. It darn well surpassed it. So from one AFC pretender collapsing, we have another AFC pretender collapsing, and that would be none other than our favorite Indianapolis Colts, who could not go to the worst team in football and find a win. Dwayne, this time I'll start with you. Who is to blame for Indianapolis' dramatic collapse, losing 26-11 on the road to the
Call me
worst
crazy,
team
but it's
in
the
football?
Jaguars' fault. I have, and I had, and I still have, and I still have, and maybe I don't know football, and maybe I should never come back on the show. I don't, within the Colts. I mean, when you look at this, right, this football team doesn't win games when Jonathan Taylor doesn't have 100 yards. Jonathan Taylor didn't have 100 yards on Sunday. This game has won several football games with Carson Wentz not playing great. He has not lit up the scoreboard this year. Now, he finishes the season with 27-7, which is one of the best quarterback interception ratios on the season. And might I add, he was that one faithful interception away from being the only head quarterback in NFL history to not throw a single interception on the road. So Carson Wentz did, I think, everything that at least I expected Carson Wentz to do this season, which is be Carson Wentz. Now, he wasn't flashy. He wasn't the Carson Wentz that almost won the Super Bowl a couple years ago. Almost won MVP the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl at all. No, he wasn't. And I didn't expect that. But I expected Carson Wentz to take care of the football. I expected Carson Wentz to play okay. I expected Carson Wentz to fill in the Jimmy G role from a couple years ago when the 49ers went to the Super Bowl. And I told Justin a couple times, and I told some other friends a couple times, I said the Colts could make the Super Bowl because they have all the pieces that the 49ers had just a couple years ago, right? They have a good running game with Jonathan Taylor. They have a great offensive line. They have a defense that's there. They have a head coach that kind of knows that, not kind of, but knows what he's doing and could easily outcoach anybody on the opposing sidelines. All of that was working. And it just so happened, unfortunately for the Colts, that everything that usually goes into the pot when they lose went into the pot, right? They were playing in Jacksonville, which they haven't won. They haven't won their last now 7 games in Jacksonville. Jonathan Taylor didn't rush for over 100 yards. They don't win when he doesn't do that. I mean, yeah, Carson Wentz threw for less than 200 yards and he had the 1 touchdown and the 1 interception. But if we're being completely honest, I don't really think I don't think I ever felt the Colts were out of this game. Even when there's only 8 minutes left in the ball game and they're starting to kind of get some stuff together, I don't think that they were ever coming out of the game. I really just think that the Jaguars just wanted it more. I think that the Jaguars, they honestly, they just fell into the trap, right? We talk about trap games all the time, and very rarely do we see a playoff team on the playoff push succumb to the trap game. And I think we just saw the Colts succumb to the trap game. I think we have to give a lot of credit to the Jaguars. And this is a good week for the Jaguars, right? Not only do they win their regular season finale at home, not only do they beat a division rival, not only do they play spoiler and keep them out of the playoffs, they also get the number 1 pick in the draft for the 2nd consecutive season. So, I mean, those are a lot of big wins for the Jaguars, and obviously it sucks to call it sucks that the Colts aren't in the playoffs because we all thought that they were a lock to be in the playoffs. I think they were close to 90%. They had the highest playoff percentage to get into the playoffs of all the teams that were still vying for a spot. And it just sucks that they're not in the playoffs. I don't know if I'd go as far as Justin and say they're pretenders because I don't really think that anyone legitimately thought that they'd make a run for the Super Bowl this year. I think it just kind of, I mean, if you got to put blame on somebody, I'm not going to go as far as Dan Orlovsky did earlier on First Take and kind of just blame the entire organization. I guess this is really just bad game planning. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just the Colts were doing what had been working for the past, for the duration of the season. I mean, if you look at the game, this game plan was nothing different than the game plan from last week when they lost to the Raiders, and that was the first time all season that they had lost a game when Jonathan Taylor had ran for over 100 yards. He had 108 yards in that game. They lost that game too. So I think the Colts just stick to the game plan that had been working for them at least through this back half of the season. The Jaguars recognized that. They stepped up. They rose to the challenge, and they got to have some fun out of it. They got to keep the division rival out of the playoffs, and they got to cause mayhem, and they got the first pick. So I'm sure Justin's probably going to blame Carson Wentz or maybe the coach or something, but I don't know. I feel like Carson Wentz had, when you consider all the doubters and all the pressure that was on Carson Wentz to make this season successful, right? I would still chalk this up as a success for Carson Wentz because he still played good football this season. I don't think there was ever really a game where we looked at Carson Wentz and said he played bad football. Obviously, there were some games where he might not have thrown a touchdown, and that happens to the best of us. But them, not us. I don't play football, but like you guys know what I mean. I don't. And I'm not a Carson Wentz apologist. Maybe I've been around Neil too much, and I'm a little bit too positive. But I don't think this is an indictment on the Colts. I don't think this is an indictment on Frank Reich. Most importantly, I don't think this is an indictment on Carson Wentz. I mean, we saw the Jaguars beat the Bills a couple weeks ago, 9-6. So, and we all know that this is the NFL with the best football players in the world, regardless of what team they're on, and regardless of all this other stuff. And I guess this just goes to show that the parity in the NFL maybe isn't as stratified as we thought. I mean, we saw the Texans blow out the Chargers. We saw the Texans blow the Chargers. Now we get to see the Jaguars get 2 wins after getting completely embarrassed by the Patriots. So maybe they had something to prove. I don't know, but I just don't know if I can really blame anybody on the Colts. I think they just got outplayed and they got outcoached, really.
Considering that the Colts haven't won in Jacksonville since 2014, maybe Dwayne has a point. But Steezy, have you two been spending too much time with Neil and being positive, or do you actually have somebody to blame within the Colts organization?
I'm going to go the easy route, and I will say, Carson, and you don't just look at this game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. You also look at the game against the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, we're favored, if I'm not mistaken. And I know Carson Wentz didn't practice all week, and so that might have been the reason why he struggled so immensely in the first half of that football game. But they had 2 opportunities. they beat the Patriots a couple of weeks ago. They beat the Cardinals. So that plays into what Dwayne was talking about. They had about a 50% chance. All they had to do was win one of two games. You had two opportunities, Raiders, Jaguars. If you weren't winning against the Raiders, it had to have been against the Jaguars. I understand, like you just said, Justin, they haven't won in Jacksonville since 2014. Dwayne, like you said, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they just have their number and their divisional opponent. And props to them, not a credit to them. They wanted to play spoiler, and they did. But come on, bro. The Colts traded essentially a first-round pick, a third-round pick. You expect more than complimentary football from your quarterback if you're trading that much draft capital. There's a reason why he was in the MVP a couple of years ago. You expected not an MVP caliber season, but you expected flashes of that. And you'd expect that against the worst team in football. No matter if it's the team that has your number, no matter if it's a team that has been playing spoiler, no matter if it's a team that always seems to have a card or something over you, it does not matter. We know what's at stake. We all know and understand that the Colts can't win football games when Jonathan Taylor doesn't run for over 100 yards. Jacksonville Jaguars, they were probably intense. Their entire game plan revolved around stopping Jonathan Taylor. The Colts had to have known that. And so knowing that, prepared differently in practice, and Carson Wentz has to know what's at stake, what's on the line, and he has to know what they acquired. And get him a first-round pick and a third-round pick for the services of Carson Wentz. You can't beat the Jacksonville Jaguars in the season finale. You throw for only 185 yards. Not only do you throw for one interception, you also lose a fumble. So you turn the ball over twice against the worst team in football. And you had two opportunities. The one against the Raiders, that counts as well. We shouldn't just look at the game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had two opportunities. And so, yes, it has to be on Carson Wentz. I mean, everybody else is doing the jobs. Jonathan Taylor didn't rush for over. He rushed for damn near 100. Right? It's not like he had terrible, or it's not like he was, going over aggressive and, doing Brandon type of things. Michael Pittman had over 1,000 yards on the season. He did his thing. The defense, I guess, a falter allowing 26 points, but that Jacksonville Jaguars defense is absolutely atrocious. And you mean to tell me you can't even clear 200 yards and you're going to turn the ball over more than you throw for touchdowns? That's just unacceptable. And the quarterbacks, they get all this glory, right? When they get all this glory, they get all this credit when the teams are winning football games and whatnot. And so we have to act with the same energy when they lose football games. I mean, Dwayne, you're on the record saying that, I think when we're debating about MVP, you were talking about how they have so much importance, they have so much value, and that's why quarterbacks are responsible for winning all these MVP awards. And so even if Carson Wentz signed up to be a complimentary quarterback this season, we had to know that against the worst team in football. He didn't show up. He didn't deliver. He had 2 weeks, 2 different opponents to do that. Didn't show up. Choked. And that's just unacceptable, especially when you're getting paid that much money, and especially when you were acquired for a first rounder and a third rounder, and especially when you've been an MVP caliber quarterback before. And so I don't believe I'm asking for too much when I say these things. And so he choked. He failed.
Before Justin gets in, I just want to bring up a couple things, right? Carson Wentz this season has only thrown from over 300 yards twice, and in both those games, they lost, right? And he threw for less than 200 yards in this game. And in all 9 games that the Colts where Carson Wentz threw less than 200 yards in a football game, the Colts are 6-3, including a win against the Patriots in a game that I told the both of you on my show a couple months ago that the Patriots would win, or I'm sorry, that the Patriots would lose. He threw for 57 yards, and they walked out of there with a victory. So Carson Wentz didn't play great, and he lost a fumble. And you're right, and I understand, and all of these things are correct. Yes, and look, Justin and I know more than anybody that if there's any quarterback that gets a whole bunch of love and not a lot of blame when it comes to the things that's wrong, it's our quarterback, and it's the guy whose jersey he's wearing, and Aaron Rodgers, because we love to praise Aaron Rodgers, and then no one wants to hold him for his accountabilities as the reason why we're 1-4 in NFC Championship games and all this other stuff, right? And I get that. But here's what I'll say about Carson Wentz. And again, I'm not a Carson Wentz fan. I'm not even a Carson Wentz apologist. I'm just calling it like I see it. The Colts absolutely should have won one of these 2 games. That is 100% correct. And the loss to the Raiders isn't that surprising because this is a good football team with a good running back and a seemingly good coach who I think they'll retain to make their permanent head coach come next season, unless they just think that Brian Flores is just too irresistible to bring in. You've got who I believe is a top 10 back in Josh Jacobs. You have who I still believe is at the very least a top 12 quarterback in Derek Carr. You have a top 3, maybe top 5, depending on who you ask, tight end in Darren Waller. Hunter Renfrow, I've been saying all season that Cole Beasley was the best slot receiver in football. Clearly, I forgot that Hunter Renfrow exists because Hunter Renfrow is absolutely hands down the best slot wide receiver in the NFL, right? So the loss to the Raiders is understandable. And you guys are 100% right? The loss to the Jaguars is absolutely inexcusable. But Carson Wentz didn't do anything out of the ordinary, right? And I think that maybe what's happening with Carson Wentz is a little bit of what's happening with what happened with Mitchell Trubisky in Chicago, right? We blame Mitchell Trubisky a lot for the failures of the Chicago Bears because we looked at Mitchell Trubisky in the retrospect of what Deshaun Watson was doing in Houston and what Patrick Mahomes was doing in Kansas City. That had nothing to do with Mitchell Trubisky. Mitchell Trubisky was drafted by who he was drafted, regardless of who was drafted before him or who was drafted after him, right? And he did what he could in that situation and led that team to a lot of wins. And really, under that tenure, the Bears were the best team, or at least the second best team in the NFC North while Mitchell Trubisky was there, right? And I have absolutely no doubt, right? Yeah, Carson Wentz and the Indianapolis Colts will continue to be playoff contenders. Will continue to make themselves relevant in the playoff picture for years to come. I don't think Carson Wentz underperformed. Obviously he didn't overperform, right? I think Carson Wentz did exactly what Carson Wentz was expected to do, which was be better than what he was doing in Philadelphia these last 2 years. Now, he did turn the ball over 2 times, right? He absolutely did do that. He's only thrown 7 picks this season. So it's not like he's a turnover machine like a Baker Mayfield or any of these other guys. And yeah, he lost a fumble, but I don't know. Maybe I just have a little bit too much faith in Carson Wentz, but I'm not just going to completely just rip Carson Wentz to shreds because I don't think he played. I'm not going to say that Carson Wentz was the reason why they lost either games because Carson Wentz played exactly how he'd been. He only averages a little over 200 yards a game. So he played exactly how he's been playing all season. They just couldn't get the job done.
So there is a benefit of being older because being with that, I've seen a lot. Montana's career, I saw most of John Elway, most of Dan Marino, all of Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees. I say all that to say I've seen enough and I know what good quarterback play looks like. And Carson Wentz obviously is not a good quarterback. And in seeing that, the issue is not Carson Wentz. The issue is Frank Reich. Because y'all are both correct. You should have at least won one of these 2 games. And losing to a Raiders team that had everything to play for is understandable. Losing on the road to Jacksonville in the manner you did is not. And I'll explain why. Y'all both mentioned that Jonathan Taylor, without Derrick Henry in the league, is the best running back. Bar none. Then in that situation, you can't have 2 games to win. And in both games, Jonathan Taylor does not touch the ball 25 times in either game. No matter how much Jacksonville is loading the box, that is not acceptable. No, it really is not. You can't have a situation where a bad quarterback, and this is where you start to blame Frank Reich, because you are the person who I have to believe pushed the organization to trade for Carson Wentz, giving up that draft capital. You have to know the player that you have. In a must-have win or must-have game, you can't have Carson Wentz dropping back 29 times and then be surprised he was sacked 6 times, losing a fumble and losing an interception, all while Jonathan Taylor touches the ball 15 times. That is lunacy. And people will say, well, Jacksonville stacked the box and Jacksonville got up to an early lead because of those turnovers. Well, guess what? You know what also transpired on Sunday? We watched San Francisco fall to a quick 17-0 hole in LA. Did San Francisco stop running the ball once? Absolutely not. They continued to give the ball to Eric Mitchell, continually gave the ball to Deebo Samuel because that is the identity of that football team. You cannot, with 1 win in 2 games, have a situation where your best player and arguably an MVP candidate does not touch the ball 25 times in either game. That is lunacy. That will get you beat. And as you said, yeah, sure, this is not what Carson Wentz was brought here for. Then why is he dropping back 29 times? How the hell in this game does he drop back 29 times? And you're comfortable with 6 sacks, one of which led to a fumble he lost, and obviously points in the next direction, and then the crucial interception later on. That's on Frank Reich. And Carson Wentz, at this point in his career, has shown you who he is. So no game, I don't care how big of a hole you drop that into, can you ever afford to have Carson Wentz throwing the ball 29 times? You're asking for trouble. Like, there is a reason, Dwayne, as to why Carson Wentz's role, his numbers were considerably down. Because Frank Reich knows the quarterback he is, and is almost like what Kevin Stefanski has done with Baker Mayfield, trying to protect him from himself. And if you know you have to protect your team from the quarterback, then how are you dropping back 29 times in a must-win game when your best player does not touch it 16 times? That's absolutely.
I think
it's crazy. It is. There's no answer for it. No matter how much you load the box, everyone loads the box for San Francisco. You think San Francisco cares? They're going to find a way to run the football because they know Jimmy Garoppolo in moments of certain situations is turnover prone, and that's not the strength of your roster. The strength of your roster is not your passing attack with Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Okay. I think you're not wrong. You're 100% right. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say though that Frank Reich is trying to protect the Colts from Carson Wentz. I think what we're looking at though is simply there are a slew of guys in run-first offenses who aren't the best player on their football team, right? Like, and all of those guys and all of those offenses, they don't drop back as much. But I don't know if I'd go as far as to say it's because the coaches are trying to protect the team from the player. I think it's just because that's how the scheme works, right? Look at Jimmy G in San Francisco. Is Jimmy G better than Carson Wentz? Sure, Jimmy G is better than Carson Wentz. But you could also make an argument that Carson Wentz is better than Jimmy G. It's really, really close, right? Is Ryan Tannehill better than Carson Wentz? You can make that argument. Is Baker Mayfield better than Carson Wentz? Absolutely not. Is Matt Stafford better than Carson Wentz? 100%, right? So when you're looking at some of these, is Kirk Cousins better than Carson Wentz? I personally don't like Carson Wentz. I mean, I personally don't like Kirk Cousins. I don't even know why the Vikings ever paid him the money that they paid him, and Kirk Cousins should be arrested for highway robbery because it's a lot of money he's stealing from the Minnesota Vikings organization. But I think that Carson Wentz and Kirk Cousins are a lot closer in ability and a lot closer in impact on winning than I think we would like to admit, and I think that we like to accept. Here's the point, right? The Vikings, the Titans, obviously, the Browns, the 49ers, and even the Rams to a lesser degree. All five of those teams have run-first offenses. All five of those teams typically don't pass the ball as much as they run the ball. Now, you can take the Rams out of that because they have a good quarterback in Matt Stafford, a veteran quarterback in Matt Stafford, and they don't run the football, primarily because they haven't really had a decent running back this season. Also because when you add Odell Beckham Jr., you've got Cooper Kupp, who's the best wide receiver in football this season, and you have what's his face, who got injured, who'll be coming back. They don't really
Cam Akers,
right? Like they don't really need to run the football that much as they've had to in years past, right? So when you're looking at these other four teams, the Titans, the Browns, the Vikings, and the 49ers, I'm not 100% sure if I don't necessarily think that if you take any of those four guys and put them on the Colts, if the outcome of the Colts season is any different. And I think that's kind of where I'm hedging my bet on Carson Wentz so far this season. Is I expected a down year from Carson Wentz, obviously because he looked bad in Philly. He looked really, really bad in Philly. He was dealing with a whole bunch of injuries. He's coming back in Frank Reich. There's a lot of stuff he had to deal with. He was the only person in the history of history to sprain his ankles, both of them, at the same time on the exact same play. I don't think we've ever seen anybody do that before. I don't think we'll ever see anybody do that again. And so all jokes aside and all things considered, I think Carson Wentz I really just think that this was a successful year for the Colts, right? And I think the reason why you can say that primarily, and I see the face you're making, Justin, I think the reason why you can say that is primarily because no one going into the season expected Jonathan Taylor to be who Jonathan Taylor became as the season progressed. And right, here's what I'll say. I expected Jonathan Taylor to be a good back. I don't think any of us expected Jonathan Taylor to finish the season leading the league in rushing or to finish the season as the best back in football. So with all that being considered, when you look at how this season progressed on a week-to-week basis, and as we saw Jonathan Taylor continue to be greater, I think it became very, very apparent to Frank Reich that obviously the game plan has to change. Obviously, you're not winning football games if Jonathan Taylor isn't playing at his optimum level, and the only way to do that is to get him the ball. So, yeah, maybe you do put this on Frank Reich because he just completely abandoned the game plan, as we've seen a lot of coaches do a lot of times when they start to panic, and Frank Reich clearly panicked. Here's the thing that I'll say, and I just talked about this while Justin was talking, and I'll talk about it later on this week because now I'll put it in my show. Me personally, I think Frank Reich should be fired. And I don't think that Frank Reich should be fired because he's not a bad – Frank Reich is not a bad coach. But we've seen in the history of the NFL that there are a lot of coaches that are just better at being coordinators than they are at being coaches. And I personally believe that Frank Reich is a better offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach than he is a head coach. And we have now seen, and we'll get into this, I know we'll get into this in the show later on, we have seen probably the most shocking Black Monday firing we've seen in recent memory. Brian Flores is on the market. And of all these coaches and of all these football teams that aren't the Green Bay Packers, that aren't the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that aren't, the Rams or the 49ers or a lot of these teams that you can say are kind of, they've got young coaches that show promise or they've got old coaches that need to go, right? Of all of those football teams, none of those football teams have a coach that is better than Brian Flores right now. I really, really think that if Brian Flores is the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts next season, we're talking about the Colts in a completely different light this time next year. I don't know because Brian Flores is head and shoulders better than Frank Reich. That's 100% sure.
For me, I would personally keep Frank Reich because I still think the quarterback is the issue. And I've always said this. I don't know why the hell the Indianapolis Colts did trade for Matt Ryan, or at least attempt to, but I'll leave it there because Dwayne gave me the perfect segue into talking about Black Monday right now. And as it stands, along with Brian Flores, 3 other head coaches have been fired, if I'm correct. Denver Broncos let go of Vic Fangio. Finally, the Chicago Bears moved on from not only head coach Matt Nagy, but general manager Ryan Pace. And there is also a double change in the same NFC North division with the Minnesota Vikings, who moved on from Mike Zimmer and general manager Rick Spielman. So I will start with you this time, Steezy. What are your thoughts on a decently, moderately, busy Black Monday?
Man, I mean, Dwayne alluded to it, but the firing of Brian Flores I think it has everyone scratching their heads. Let's not forget, a couple of years ago in 2020, it was his first year coaching the team. Miami Dolphins were an absolute laughingstock, completely bereft of talent. Remember when they were getting blown out 55-0 against the Ravens? I think the Cowboys lit up the scoreboard. Yeah, they were. I mean, if I could think of a better word than laughingstock, I would use it. But that's what the Dolphins, that's what they were. A couple of years ago, they ended up finishing the season 5-11. That team was supposed to go winless, and they ended up finishing 5-11. Everything that we're saying right now, or I don't know if everyone is saying this, but a lot lately, I'm seeing a lot more people praising Dan Campbell, the head coach of the Lions. They're talking about how he has to stick around. He instills so much grit, so much fight, so much determination. He's there. He's not the most X's and O's, but he's the type of head coach that's going to get you, motivated. That's going to get you ready for war. That's going to help to spark a culture change. And for Brian Flores, he overachieved. Plain and simple. Year 1, 5-11, they should have gone winless. They were lucky to win that many games. And so you go into the year after that, 10-6, a 5-win jump, 10-6, and they missed the playoffs by 1 game. And then this year, Dolphins became the first team in NFL history to have both a 7-game losing streak and the 7-game win streak in the same season. Who was the head coach? Brian Flores. About 500? Yes. Were they 1 game, maybe 2 away from the playoffs? Yes. How many games did Tua miss? Their starting quarterback? He missed 4. And so that firing just – I saw a tweet earlier today. I don't remember the tweet verbatim, but essentially what the tweet was trying to say was that this is what bad organizations do. This is what bad franchises do. You bring in the guy. He's sparked this culture change. You become relevant. somewhat relevant around the league, especially on division. You're on the come up. They had an elite defense the second half of this past season. They had an elite defense all of last year. And he's also not, the most X's and O's type of guy, but he's also like a Dan Campbell, if not a lot better than Dan Campbell. And so 19 wins in the last 2 years by your kneecaps. 19 wins in the last 2 years, constant progression, a culture change, winning games that they shouldn't be winning. Went 2-0 against Bill Belichick's head coach of all time this year. They went 2-0 against the Patriots, a playoff team. I really have no words. I have no answers. And then there's a guy in New York by the name of Edge who still has a job. It's just the NFL system is broken. And I said that on Twitter earlier. I'm gonna say it again. The coaching system is broken. I just don't see how you fire a guy so deserving of the job. I've never seen anything so egregious. It's almost criminal. Like, I feel like calling the cops on the Dolphins. Like, they should be investigated. Are they on drugs? Stephen Ross, what is it? I don't know. I just don't think any sort of explanation on their end is gonna justify, letting go of Brian Flores. I don't care who they bring in. I don't care if they bring in Jim Harbaugh. He might be an upgrade over Brian Flores, but I mean, you know what they say. You never really know what you have until you lose it. And so let's say the Dolphins finish last in the division next year, even under the lowly Jets, they're going to regret this. I'm surprised Brian Flores hasn't even accepted a job yet. He should accept a job within the next couple of days just to kind of rub it in the Dolphins' faces. But I mean, to me, that's the highlight of Black Monday. Matt Nagy, that was inevitable. Mike Zimmer, that was inevitable. Vic Fangio, I mean, I don't know if that was inevitable, but the Denver Broncos will be using a new voice. Wow. And then Joe Judge, man, coaching system is broken. That's that.
Dwayne, is your favorite Miami coach, Brian Flores, really the highlight of Black Monday for you, or do you have another angle that you're taking?
No, I don't think it gets any more egregious, any more flat out flabbergasting, really, than the news of Brian Flores. You look at the coaches that are still employed in the NFL over the last 2 years. Just name off some names. Let's name off some records, right? Brian Flores has finished after his last 2 years, and he obviously was there for 3 years. But after these last 2 years, he's 19-14 in Miami, which is the same record as John Harbaugh, Cliff Kingsbury. He has one more win than Mike McCarthy, who's at 18-15. He has two more wins than Bill Belichick, who's at 17-16. Kyle Shanahan was only 16-17. Zach Taylor's 14-18-1, and that's only really bolstered because of this season. Ron Rivera is 14-19 with 2 consecutive 7-game seasons. Matt Rule is 10-23. Joe Judge is 10-23. So I don't know how Joe Judge still has a job, and I think we all recognize and understand that if there's anybody that should have been fired, it should have been Joe Judge, right? The Mike Zimmer firing makes sense. Obviously, I've been saying that Matt Nagy shouldn't be the coach of the Chicago Bears since they let go of Mitchell Trubisky. And I don't wish bad things on any of these guys. I hope these guys find success, but they don't need to be head coaches in at least those situations. Twice yesterday, inside the 5-yard line, Joe Judge ran a QB sneak inside of his own 5-yard line, not in Washington's 5-yard line, his. That's grounds for termination mid-game, if you ask me. I don't know how you get to, I don't exactly remember what quarter that was in, but I don't understand how you get to call another play after making that boneheaded decision and to double down on it by saying, oh, well, we were trying to make room for our punter to punt. Yeah, you triple down on it. You should absolutely be fired. So the fact that Joe Judge still has a job is absurd to me. If we're being completely honest, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Guru's really high on this guy. I don't know if Matt Rule's the answer in Carolina. I didn't think he was the answer when they hired him. He's definitely not the answer now. How Matt Rule still has a job, we don't know. Now, maybe he could get fired. Obviously, Black Monday is just the day when usually all happens. But we know these firings can kind of take some time for them to all process and shake about. I agree with you, though, Steezy. I'm not 100% sure if Vic Fangio was a name that I expected to come across the Twitter feed this morning on Black Monday. Just because, this is obviously you have your COVID-19 and you have this year when the entire team really is dealing with injury, and there's all this other stuff, and maybe they're just trying to just like blow it up and start from scratch. And we obviously know they're trying to swing big for Aaron Rodgers, and Steezy tried to send me into a spiral of depression the other day by posting a poll on Twitter asking where Aaron Rodgers should go, and I'm not that conversation. We're focused on what's right in front of us right now. But no, Brian Flores, and I'm not going to do what Steezy A does, and I'm sure he'll do it. I don't know if he was on First Take today, but I'm sure at some point he will when he returns. He's going to pull the black card, and he's going to talk about all of that stuff, and all of that's true. But I mean, I made fun of Dan Campbell for his first press conference because I thought he looked like a fool. I've made fun of him in press conferences past after that because he showed up to one press conference with a race car helmet on. I'm just like, this guy's just a goof. But when you look at what Dan Campbell has done this season, you look at what Brian Flores did in his first season, it's like Steve said, it's really pretty much the exact same thing. All Brian Flores wanted to do in his first season was establish a winning culture. And if I'm not mistaken, they rallied off 3 or 4 wins, or maybe it was all 5 of their wins came in on those last 5. I don't remember really because it's been a long time, but a lot of a chunk of their wins came towards the waning end of that season, similar to this Lions football team, because Brian Flores just really wanted to establish a winning culture, right? And then you move on to the season after that, and they go 10 wins, and they're literally the only 10-win team in the NFL to miss the playoffs because the AFC was really, really, really competitive and really stacked last season. You follow it up with starting off the season 1-7, and then to rally off 8 straight wins at this point, and then miss out. You have to think if they don't lose 7 straight, instead they lose 6 straight in the beginning of the season, they're in the playoffs. So really 2 years in a row, this Miami Dolphins football team is 1 game out of the playoffs, and now he's gone. And obviously it's a power struggle because he said it. I mean, Stephen Ross basically said it inadvertently, right? He has faith in Tua. I think it's been kind of clear for a while that Brian Flores might not have been completely sold onto it, but he still worked with what he had, and he still got this football team in a position to be competitive, not just in his division, not just in his conference, but in the NFL. Steezy's right. I mean, it's like every season, every week we turned on Miami Dolphins football, they were being blown out by 50 points, being blown out by 45 points, left and right. And now 2 years in a row, you have a winning season, and you're fired. I don't know.
Makes no sense.
Which firing is worse, this one or the Doug Peterson firing? Because I still don't understand how Doug Peterson got fired from the Eagles and Howie Roseman still has a job. And maybe that's comparing apples to oranges, but this was just really, 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 really bad. And like I said earlier, I've been talking about Jim Harbaugh all season because I didn't think that Brian Flores would be without a job. If there's 2 guys that I think are going to be getting a call from every single football team that needs a head coach, it's Jim Harbaugh and it's Brian Flores. And whatever 2 teams that those 2 guys go to, if Jim Harbaugh makes the jump and comes back into the NFL, both of those teams will likely be in the playoff picture come this time next year because both of those guys are really good really good coaches. Both of those guys are winners. But this Brian Flores thing, I don't know how you can explain that.
I'm going to tell you this. Don't feel as bad about the Brian Flores firing as y'all do, simply because I think Brian Flores wants it. I think, as someone mentioned, he was not sold on Tua. Just like I am not. I don't think Tua is a starting quarterback in his league because the owner wants Tua and clearly Brian Flores does not. So he gets away from having to coach a quarterback he doesn't want. And I'm almost certain he was not the guy who asked for them to draft him, especially when you had Justin Herbert in that same draft. So, I'm not upset because I'm sure Brian Flores wants out in Miami anyhow. I will say what I'm a bit surprised is Vic Fangio. Now, he's a guy that has lost about 30 games in 3 or 4 seasons. I think 3 seasons as head coach. So maybe that would justify his firing. But I will also say this. How I know that he should still have a head coaching job is I think he is the first, or the Denver Broncos are the first team with a top 3 scoring defense that didn't make the playoffs. And I say all that to say it's clear the problem is the quarterback. And I don't know how you give Vic Fangio the worst quarterback in the division because this division has Patrick Mahomes, Derek Carr, Justin Herbert. So whoever Denver trots out there, they have the worst quarterback. And then you ask Vic Fangio to get the playoffs. What do you think is going to happen? This is a quarterback-rich division. You're not going to win with defense and running the ball alone. My biggest shocker, as you all touched on, so I won't spend much time on it, is how Joe Judge continues to have a job. Daniel Jones has gotten progressively worse every single season he has in the NFL. This team is the worst offense this side of Jacksonville, and they have 10 wins. Sorry, they have 10 double-digit losses in a 17-game season. That's impressive. Impressively bad. Like, I've never seen anything like this. And the things that he said that he was going to fix in New York, he has not fixed. This team is not competitive. It does not play tough. The players don't play for him. Daniel Jones has gotten worse by the season. I mean, I remember his rookie season. I was almost saying that this guy looks superb. And no, I am also shocked that New York has said that they're going to bring back Daniel Jones next season. Neither Jones nor Judge should be there. And that's all I'm going to say. That is the biggest shock for me. How do you continually play a man who has, made you worse and worse by the season, as it continues to go on? Who has gotten worse and worse this season? Who has gotten worse and worse this season as well, though, is none other than the Los Angeles Rams starting quarterback, Matthew Stafford, who, by my count, led the league with 17 interceptions, and half of those came in the last 3 games of the season. So, Steezy, I will go to you here. Should the Rams be concerned about their starting quarterback as they enter the playoffs?
I think most definitely. I just don't think that the concerns should get to a point where, they're going to think about moving off of him, because when you ask that question, I feel like there's a lot of different ways you could approach it. And so I'm going to say yes. And also because, his lack of playoff experience, that's definitely going to play a part. He's been in the playoffs, but his playoff record is 0-3. So not very sparkling, right? And so not only are you worried about that, you're also worried about, like you said, all those turnovers, the big parties, that he's been throwing. To be quite honest, me personally, I love it. Just because before the year, I was on record saying that Matthew Stafford is overrated. I'm not saying he's not a great quarterback. He's definitely a top 10 quarterback, but I just heard all these whispers of people saying that, oh, he's going to win MVP. He's going to be first or second team All-Pro. He's going to take the Rams to the Super Bowl, and he's going to really turn his team around. And, and so based off of that talk, but if they just stuck with he's a top 10 quarterback, I wouldn't have said that. But now I'm seeing all these picks. He's almost single-handedly throwing games away. I mean, like I told Dwayne on the show last week, they were lucky to get by the Baltimore Ravens with all those picks that he was throwing, the pick sixes. He's not just throwing picks, he's throwing pick sixes. And so it's definitely a concern, but I just think that at the end of the day, the talent, it's going to prosper. I mean, Von Miller, he is only getting comfortable as the weeks continue to progress. Cam Akers, he's only going to get more comfortable. He's going to add that dynamic element, that the running game has kind of missed all year long. He's going to complement Sony Michel well. OBJ, he's still doing his Dougie. Cooper Kupp, I mean, it's a shame he didn't break Calvin Johnson's record, but the season that he had, I mean, he's uncoverable, unguardable, best receiver in football this year, hands down. And so I just think that the talent around him, the brilliant genius, the brilliant mind of Sean McVay, I think all that is going to be more than enough to overcome his shortcomings and his turnovers and his lack of playoff experience. And to be quite honest with you guys, I could see the Rams going all the way over to, to the Super Bowl. If the Packers aren't representing NFC in the Super Bowl, I could see the Rams, just because of everything that they have at the disposal. And so while it is a concern of mine, Matthew Stafford's pick parties and his lack of playoff experience, I just think that at the end of the day, everything that they have around them, there's so many stars, there's so much talent, there's a brilliant mind, there's a genius at the head coaching spot. So I think that it's a worry, but it's not an immense worry to the point where after the season they're thinking of moving off of him. So that's kind of where I stand there.
I did not intro this segment well at all because part of that obviously was the San Francisco comeback led by Stafford's 2 interception, the game-sealing one at the very end. Mm-hmm. So Dwayne, heading into the playoffs, should the Rams be concerned about Matt Stafford?
Yeah, but before we start, I just want to let Steezy know, and Justin and I have had this conversation ad nauseum at this point. Sean McVay is not a genius, but good head coach, not a genius. You don't run into the end zone with your players to celebrate a touchdown with like half of the third quarter, whatever it was to go, and then not win by like a lot. So that's embarrassing. The Rams should be concerned about Matt Stafford. but they should have been concerned about Matt Stafford from the beginning, right? And that sounds kind of crazy because I've been singing the praise of Matt Stafford all season, and rightfully so. I wanted people to understand that Matt Stafford is a very talented quarterback, and he is. Matt Stafford is a talented quarterback. But here's the thing about Matt Stafford that I think people have forgotten. I think that people need to remember, and I think that as a Packers fan, I feel like it's my duty and my job to let you guys know, and on a little bit of a secret. Matt Stafford don't do well under the bright lights. Matt Stafford doesn't do well in the big games. I mean, Matt Stafford plays hard against the division. Matt Stafford is a talented quarterback. Don't get me wrong. I think you could make the argument that he's top 10. Me personally, I have him at least in the top 12 or 13 or so. But Matt Stafford has all the tools to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. He has all the tools to be an MVP. He's got all the tools to take this Rams team to the Super Bowl this season. He has all those tools. The problem is I don't know 100% if Matt Stafford trusts himself in close games, and it doesn't look like he does. I think from time to time you can kind of see that Matt Stafford kind of starts to second guess himself. Now, here's the thing. When you take away these last 2 or 3 games, right? So this season, Matt Stafford was playing terribly in the first 2 third quarters, but when it mattered most in the fourth quarter, he was perfect. He had, I think, heading into the game against Baltimore, maybe the game before that, he had I think it was 7 or 8 touchdowns, no picks in the fourth quarter. So it's not that he does know how to play good fourth quarter football, but when you compile a fourth quarter comeback or holding on to a fourth quarter lead on top of playoff pressure, on top of all that other stuff, on top of a trip to the Super Bowl or a trip to the next round, then you start to see Matt Stafford get a little bit shaky. And I think if Matt Stafford plays every game as if it's just a regular football game, then Matt Stafford will be fine. And I don't know if Matt Stafford has that ability. I love Matt Stafford. I think Matt Stafford is great. Matt Stafford is one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch, which is kind of weird to say because everybody's in love with Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray and all these guys that can run around and flip their wrist and all these other things. No, don't get me wrong. Obviously Aaron Rodgers is my favorite quarterback to watch. But Matt Stafford, great. And I think he's one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch. As vanilla as he is one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch in the NFL because I think he's just real. Maybe it's overrated at this point to say that he's underrated, but I still think that Matt Stafford, to a degree, is a little bit underrated. I think he can win a Super Bowl. I think he can take this team to the Super Bowl. Let's be honest. If Jared Goff can do it, Matt Stafford can do it. And I get it, right? At that time, if I'm not mistaken, they still had Todd Gurley, and Aaron Donald was, at that point, had just hit, if he hadn't already, had just hit the first year of his prime where that defense was really, really good. And now you've added Jalen Ramsey and all this other stuff. So this is a really talented roster. Yes, Matt Stafford, yes, the Rams should be concerned about Matt Stafford, but it has less to do with Matt Stafford's play and more to do with he's just not going to be the best quarterback on the field at any given point in these playoffs. And that's just kind of the fact of the matter. Kyler Murray's going to be the better quarterback than him come this weekend. If he can get past Kyler Murray, whether they're hosting Dallas, going to Tampa Bay, or going to Green Bay, those 3 guys have the better quarterback than him as well. So the only way where I look at the Rams and I say yes, they have the better quarterback is if they were to play the Eagles. And unfortunately for them, they're not playing the Eagles. So that sucks to suck. And maybe if the Saints got in, then I'd say they have the better quarterback than the Saints because the Saints don't have a quarterback right now. But yeah, they should be concerned. But it's not because of Matt Stafford's talent. It's just because we all know in the playoffs, if you're gonna go to the Super Bowl, if you're gonna win 12 games, if you're gonna win a Super Bowl, you have to have the best quarterback in the field, or one of the best quarterbacks in the field. And while he's in the top 5 by default, he's number 5.
So you'll soon get a theme of what I've been saying all night. When I've said you are paid by your level of accountability to any organization, whether it be a CEO or, guess what, a head coach. And I said Brandon Staley put the Chargers in this position where they're watching the playoffs. I had a situation, I put the onus on Frank Reich for the Colts also missing the playoffs. And guess what? The concern isn't Matt Stafford for me, it's Sean McVay. And I say this to say because I've said this ad nauseum, as Dwayne correctly said. This offense is all from every one of them, from Kyle Shanahan to Matt LaFleur to the same Sean McVay. All of them have stolen this from Kyle's dad, Mike Shanahan, from his title-winning days in Denver, and he brought it over to Washington, et cetera, et cetera. and then Gary Kubiak, I think, took it to the Texans. This offense is predicated on the run. And Sean McVay, for whatever his wisdom, has gone away from that to show off his brand new shiny toy in Matt Stafford. And no team runs more three wide receiver sets than the Los Angeles Rams. That is a problem because if we're going to talk about Trevor Lawrence's inability to protect the football, he led the league in interceptions with 17 alongside Matt Stafford. You cannot continually decide to run all these three wide receiver sets in the offense predicated on running the football when your quarterback does not care about taking care of the football. You just can't continue to do this. And so I put this again on the head coach because he is the one putting Matt Stafford in this situation. He is the one calling plays no matter how many times his quarterback turns over the football. I mentioned it. 8 of these 17 turnovers have come in the last 3 games, and that has nothing to do with the string of pick sixes that occurred earlier in the season. That has nothing to do with the fumbles I've mentioned. And now you're going into a playoff scenario where Dwayne is correct. You're going to be playing quarterbacks, 2 of which do not turn over the football. Because let us, for argument's sake, say you get past I'll say 2. Sometimes I wonder about Dak Prescott. But let's say, for argument's sake, you get past the Arizona Cardinals. To get to the Super Bowl as a 4 seed, you are going to have to get through the Packers and the Buccaneers. Those 2 quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, do not turn over the football. You cannot have a situation where your team is losing the turnover battle and expected to win on the road. And you're going to have to win on the road because the Green Bay Packers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers both have the higher seeds. This has to be a problem. And again, I don't put this on Matt Stafford because as much as he's the one throwing away the football, the head coach is the man that's putting him in the position to throw away the football. He is the one calling the plays. He is the one running all these 3 wide receiver sets in an offense predicated on running the football, even while his quarterback is still turning over the football. This has to be on the head coach. This is the reason you're paid all this bucks, and this is the reason why we have all these people calling you a boy genius when I know better than that. So to wrap up this show, guys, as we mentioned, talking about going on the road in the playoffs, we all know Wildcard Weekend is typically full of upsets. Steezy, which home team of the 6 that are playing this weekend over 3 days, and guys, also let me mention, we are having first this season, Wildcard Monday. Of the 6 home teams playing this weekend, which do you have on upset alert?
Man, I so desperately want to talk about Dallas, but I'm going to say that for Dwayne if he decides to go that route. So I'm going to go a different route. I'm going to go.
Well, gee.
All 3 of us. Put that out there quickly. I just figured all 3 of us were going to say Dallas, but I guess Steezy doesn't want to make the show boring, so thanks.
No, always. I try. But the more
I appreciate you.
So I'm in this right, and so I'm basing my players off of not just who has the most talent, who's able to put up numbers and whatnot. I'm also looking at players on teams that I believe will advance. How deep of a run are these guys going to go on? Are they going to go home at first round and whatnot? Just because when a player's eliminated, you're not going to have the player on your fantasy team for the rest of the playoffs. And I put money into this, and so I'm doing my due diligence. But the more that I look at it, I think everyone is looking at the Bengals right now as the talk of the NFL. They're talking about if it's not the Chiefs, maybe it's that new, shiny, explosive offense of the Bengals. Maybe Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, they recapture and recreate some of their 2019 LSU magic. But people forget Joe Burrow did lead the NFL in sacks taken this year with 51. And when you look at the Las Vegas Raiders, what's the strength of that football team on defense? It's their pass rush. Max Crosby has been putting on all year long. I know his pressures don't always lead to outright sacks. The league in pressures for a reason. And last year, if I'm not mistaken, he 3 in pressures. Yannick Ngakoue was a significant addition to that pass rush because he's freed up open lanes for Max Crosby. And so if the Vegas pass rush, if they could get after Joe Burrow and harass Joe Burrow all night long, I could see the Raiders leaving Cincinnati and advance into the next round to play, possibly the Titans. I just think they have the formula. And their secondary, it's not bad. It's not awful like it was in years past. I have Damon Arnett, but they still do have Casey Hayward, who's having somewhat of a revelation this year in terms of his play. They do have linebacker cover, KJ Wright. I know what he's capable of. And the Raiders, they can now run the football. Like I said, before the Chargers in the 3 games prior to that, they were averaging 140 yards on the ground. And they were going up against some tough run defenses. The Colts, they have one of the best run defenses of football. And Josh Jacobs was able to run all over them. Not only that, Dwayne, like you mentioned, Hudson Renfrow, best slot receiver in the game. You're also getting Darren Waller back. Before last night, he hadn't played since Thanksgiving. And so you can't really blame the Raiders for struggling in the manner that they defensively because they were missing their best player offensively, or at least their best pass catcher. And so I think Derek Carr, I think Rich Bisaccia, however you pronounce his last name, sorry if I'm butchering that, I think they could be on to something special here, because I think that if they could beat Cincinnati, they have the formula, they're able to, they have the pieces, the ingredients necessary to be able to pull off such a feat. I think they could also maybe potentially beat a Tennessee if they were to meet them in the next round. And so I really like what Las Vegas is cooking with. Right now, I'm currently on the clock and I need a quarterback. All the quarterbacks are off the board. I'm looking at Derek Carr, just because I feel like he's still so underrated. And I just think that they have the pass rush that can take the Bengals, off their game. So I think the home team that should be on upset alert gotta be the Bengals. I'm really worried from the Bengals.
I like that pick, but I don't like them to go into Kansas City though after that to win because the combined scores of those 2 games. Let's not even mention that I think Patrick Mahomes alone has his juju back from those 2 games. So, folks, sit back and let me warn Dwayne, we are over an hour and a half already, so please keep your Dallas rant to less than 5 minutes. But, folks, sit back and relax as Dwayne's Dallas rant is coming now. Take it away.
First of all, shame on the both of you for assuming that I would say that the Dallas Cowboys are the team that's on upset alert. Shame on both of you. Shame on the both of you. Because, Justin, you know just as well as I do that unfortunately we are going to be in a very uncomfortable position because, Justin, we have to root for the Dallas Cowboys this weekend because we don't want to see San Francisco in the second round of the playoffs. So I, for the first time in my life, want the Dallas Cowboys to win a playoff game. I need the Dallas Cowboys to playoff game, and it's bringing tears to my eyes as I say that. Now, again, shame on the both of you for assuming that I would say that the Dallas Cowboys are the team that's most on upset alert because as much as Dak Prescott has struggled, I expect Dak Prescott to get back to being who I like to call Dapper Dak, and he will be dotting up this San Francisco defense left and right. Now, here's the thing. This team can't stop the run, and all the 49ers love to do is stop the run. But the team that I think that we all need to recognize as the team that I actually have dropping their game this weekend is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The defense is banged up. The offense is banged up. They don't have a legitimate number 1 wide receiver. Because as great as Mike Evans is, he's hobbled, and we all know that when it comes to lower leg injuries on physical guys like a Mike Evans, you never know when it can come back up, right? They have a lot of stuff going on with Antonio Brown. The defense is banged up, as I said. And this is a Philadelphia Eagles football team that has nothing to lose. Last season, we watched the Tampa Bay Buccaneers escape out of Washington by the skin of their teeth in the playoff game. I don't know if Tampa Bay is going to be able to leave Tampa Bay and go into the next round and host another playoff game. The Philadelphia Eagles like to run the ball. They run the ball well. They run the ball by committee. Jalen Hurts is seeming like he's getting his groove and finally being able to get some control over this offense. I love Devontae Smith. He's the only reliable wide receiver on this football team, but we have to show some love to Dallas Goedert because Dallas Goedert is really, really good. I think Goedert is going to cause a lot of matchup problems for this Tampa Bay defense. I have had, and Justin, you know this because I was on Overreaction Monday at the top of the season. I have had questions about this secondary from the beginning. I've had questions about this linebacker core from the beginning. The only strength of this defense the only thing about this defense that I really, really trust is that front four, because this Philly offensive line really, really sucks, and this is going to be a battle that's won in the trenches. But over the past couple of weeks, this Philly offensive line has stepped up, and they've really been the reason why the Eagles have been able to run the football. So, as shocking as apparently it seems to both you, the two of you, who I really consider to be really good friends, and really know that as much as I hate the Cowboys, I still know football, and I'm not going to let my emotions get the best of me. That it pains me that the both of you would think that I would sit here and rant about the Dallas Cowboys. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I really don't. And Steezy, especially you, because you follow me on Twitter, and I tweeted the other day, who else has Eagles, Niners, and Rams coming out? I said that. Anyway, it's all good. Point is, I have the Eagles beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because Tom Brady is getting older, and you never bet against Tom Brady, absolutely. And they have the better coach, and they have the better quarterback. But this defense is banged up. This offense is banged up. The writing's on the wall, if you ask me. Now, obviously, if Tampa Bay wins, we won't be surprised because they have the better coach and they have the better quarterback. But when I look across all 6 games we're seeing this weekend, I see Steezy's point as far as the Raiders are concerned, but I just have a little bit more faith in Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. I don't know if that defense has an answer for Jamar Chase, if we're being completely honest. And they definitely won't have an answer for T. Higgins because I think that T. Higgins has been kind of flown under the radar this season because of how explosive Jamar Chase has been, not to mention also Joe Mixon. And they have Joe Mixon has rushed for 1,000 yards and rushed for over 1,000 yards, and Joe Burrow threw for over 4,000 yards with that offensive line being banged up. So I actually do think the Bengals can hold their own against the Raiders. That is another game that I'm on upset alert. But if I'm picking right now, which I am picking right now, I'm going to say that the upset of the weekend is going to be the Eagles over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
If someone said that Dwayne would not have gone on a Dallas rant when he had a chance, and they had money in this wallet, they just would have won. They can't. Well, I would have lost all my money if there was actually money in there. So typically, I like teams who have been there and done that before in these type of situations, as in that they've gone during the season and knocked off these teams before. And you have a situation where the Cardinals have beaten LA in LA, so too with the Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. They have beaten the Bills in Buffalo already this season. Did it? I'm going to do it. And by the way, I thought long and hard about the Eagles over the Buccaneers. My issue with that is that is strength on strength. And I mean, the Buccaneers secondary is banged up. But if there is one strength of this Tampa Bay team, it is that front seven. And I'll go as far as to see, and I saw it myself up close and personal for that NFC title game. Vita Vea takes 2 people to block. You need 2 people to take care of Vita Vea up the middle. So you're not running up the middle there. And the Eagles like to get on the edges. And the problem with that is that not only are Shaq Barrett and JPP very disciplined outside pass rushers that don't dip in when they're facing a run, the Buccaneers may have the best end-to-end laterally inside linebacker doing all of football in Levante David and Devin White, if both are healthy enough to play. And I think I'm willing to say that Devin White is actually faster than Jalen Hurts and any other Philadelphia running back. I'm almost willing to say that. So you're not going to beat him side to side. Like, no. It means if you're going to get yards, you're going to have to run up the middle line. Big old Vita Vea is right there waiting for you. So that's the only reason I didn't take this Philadelphia team. And I do not trust Jalen Hurts to test that secondary because Jalen Hurts is not a very accurate down the field passer. That's the only reason I stood away from this matchup. Y'all guys didn't do it, so I'll do it for Dwayne. Didn't do it, so I'll do it for Dwayne. It's got to be the Dallas Cowboys. And it is nothing against the Cowboys per se, more so than I think San Francisco is just a bad matchup. because the things that the Dallas has nothing to do with San Francisco. They don't care. Dallas Cowboys have an extremely great pass rush with DeMarcus Lawrence and Randy Gregory, Micah Parsons. They really can't get off the passer, especially if you don't have a very solid offensive line. That has nothing to do with San Francisco because they want to run the football. And how do you slow down the pass rush? Run right at it. Trayvon Diggs causes a lot of interceptions. San Francisco 49ers don't want to pass the football. They want to run it. So Trayvon Diggs, for as great as a ball hockey is, it's going to be almost pointless out there on the field. And, the Dallas Cowboys have gotten away from running the football. And to be quite honest, I don't think running the football is no longer a strength of theirs because that line is banged up and inconsistent. Ezekiel Elliott is basically running on one knee, and I don't know what Tony Pollard, Dallas Cowboys are going to get. And so it means you're asking that to go, target Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Guess what the 49ers want to do? Yes, their secondary is depleted and very weak, but they love to rush the passer with Nick Bosa. And their defensive line can absolutely wreck any game plan. I sat down and watched the game that the Packers played in 49ers in San Francisco. The very first series, Nick Bosa almost completely wrecked our game plan till Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers realized, all right, we're going to have to chip that guy and go away from him, or this is not going to go very well. I have to say the San Francisco 49ers, and again, it's not because of anything I hold against Dallas. I think Dallas is an extremely deep and gifted team, very, very talented. It's just I think the 49ers, what they want to do on both sides of the football, are very, very, very bad matchup for the Dallas Cowboys. Yes, I don't want to play them, Dwayne. I really don't, because I think they're also a very bad matchup for us. For what they want to do. And if there is one team of all of these teams in this NFC lineup that I think can come into Green Bay and win because of their style of play, it is the San Francisco 49ers. But yeah, I have to say if there's one team I have losing, it's Dallas. So quickly, guys, as we get out of here, there is the small issue of a national championship game going on. So give me your quick calls. Like, Dwayne, who do you got winning?
I want to say Georgia so bad, man. I've loved Georgia all season, but it's just so hard to bet against Nick Saban if you don't have a quality quarterback. And Georgia just doesn't have, I don't think their quarterback is that guy. So Alabama, again. It seems.
Same thing, Steezy.
Yeah.
Alabama, Georgia.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, just like Dwayne, I echo those same sentiments. I want to lean towards Georgia. I want to see Georgia win. I wouldn't put money on them. If I had to put money, it'd have to be on Bama. And so it's just like, I hate to be boring, but I gotta say Bama, Crimson Tide.
I want to pick the upset too, and that's how you win money in these situations. But the team with the better quarterback and the head coach typically win. And if you're going to tell me, oh, well, Georgia has the worst quarterback and the worst head coach, and they're going to win, that doesn't usually spell well or doesn't usually work out in football. So, guys, quickly tell the lovely folks how to find you and what you have coming up next. Whoever wants to jump in first.
Yes, I can go first. Doesn't matter. Follow me on Instagram at GTP Marcus. On Twitter, same thing. On TikTok, same thing. 2 shows again this week. One on Wednesday, one on Friday. On Wednesday, we'll break down the AFC, look at the AFC playoff picture. Friday, we'll do the same thing for the NFC. I can tell you that this week we'll have my good friend Sal from Sports in the Big Apple, and then also the guy from Stuff About Sports Pod coming on the show to break down the AFC. This Friday, we're supposed to have JT and Don on the show, but that's still up in the air. And there's one other guy that I'll probably have on the show to balance it out and make it 4. But yeah.
Yeah, Steezy, tell the lovely folks how to find you, what you got coming up next.
Man, as you guys know, tune in. Don't forget, This Just In, every single Monday. I think it's 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. 4 p.m. Pacific, live on YouTube, breaking out the latest in the NFL world. Don't forget to hit that subscribe. Don't forget to show some love, drop a comment. Let's, start off the new year right by showing some love. Same thing to my brother up there, GTP Marcus, all socials, same handle. Last but not least, you can always find me at Steezy A Smith, SteezyASmith. My start to the year, my end to 2021 haven't been ideal. I haven't been in studio in a while. I was in studio for a day the other day, to show up to Dwayne's show, but I've just had a lot of things going on. Still currently nursing an injury, but I am hoping to make a return sometime this week. And so as soon as I get back, I'm gonna start dropping content again. And 2022, we going crazy all year. We done being average, and so I still do have a show coming up. I've just had a lot of roadblocks, a lot of detours that I've had to take. But like I said, once I'm back in the studio, it's really all grind from here on out. And like I told you guys before, we got some stuff planned out with Dwayne. And I definitely can't wait to, come back here. Hopefully, if not next Monday, then, the Monday following that on This Just In. Shout out to Neil. Shout out Marsha. Nothing but love, y'all.
Oh, and
that's why
Justin tried to skim over this at the top of the show. Listen, people, I'm working on it. All right. I hear your comments. I hear your tweets. I see your DMs. I'm going to be the permanent host of This Just In. Just give me some time. Me, Neil, and Marsha are working on a meeting to sit down, iron out all the details. They'll send me some of those nice shirts they've got. They've got This Just In. We'll change the name of the show probably so that it doesn't have Justin's name on it. And I'll be the host of the show. Just give me some time. I hear your concerns. We're working on it.
That's the worst thing when you give a guy a chance to host this show. Comes back and bites me. But
that's what the people want. That's what the people want.
They plug the show well. So I won't say anything other than to say Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. in Barbados. Type in hashtag This Just In for everything. You'll find us here on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. If you can't find us, as Adam Lewis would say, you're not looking. So for Steezy, for Dwayne Marcus, I am the Justin of This Just In signing out. Mm-hmm. Please go watch the Alabama Georgia national title game, and indeed I think Alabama has gone up 3-0. Guys, go watch some football, and we will get back to you on Monday, same time, same channel. Good night.
Peace.
I don't have a mark on my face, and my upset son in this one, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I told the world, I talk to God every day. If God's with me, ain't nobody here better than me. I still got the world. I still got the world. I still got the world.
I said, can I be a legend? Search your soul and answer me this question. Do you think I have what it takes to be great, but still be humble and learn from my mistakes?